Continue our discussion from Chapter 4, World Economies. Chapter 5 will present the topic of global and regional economic cooperation and integration. In fact, this has been very much in the news over the past 2 to 3 years. Many people believe international trade agreements started after World War II. The truth is, international trade agreements, formal and informal, have been around for centuries. One of the earlier and well-known examples was the creation of the Silk Road. This trading route was established around 100 BC, following the diplomatic travels of the Han Dynasty and the Chinese envoy Zhang Jian to Central Asia, where Chinese goods making their way to India, Persia, and the Roman Empire, and vice versa. International trade agreements continued to flourish for many years. By 1592, Japan had developed extensive trade with European countries. The Japanese, though, being very concerned about international trade, introduced a system of foreign trade licenses to prevent smuggling and piracy in 1592. By 1639, Japan introduced measures known as the closed-door policy regarding trade. The result was Japan was basically sealed off to foreigners, with the exception of selective trading partners like the Dutch and the Chinese. The first international free trade agreement, known as the Cobden-Chevalier Treaty, was finalized in 1860 between the United Kingdom and France. It sparks off successive agreements between other countries in Europe. Many historians point to this treaty as being the first modern trade agreement. Since World War II, for a number of reasons, some political, some economic, but for most, both, international trade agreements have grown significantly. Initially, most of these agreements were called bilateral agreements between two countries. However, over the years, trade agreements became multilateral, even though there are still some bilateral agreements that are being negotiated even today. The chapter discussed the formation of key agreements like GATT, which stands for General Agreement and Tariffs. This was formed after discussions at the UN failed to create the International Trade Organization, known as ITO. By the early 1990s, it was determined that a new, more comprehensive agreement was needed. This was accomplished by the World Trade Organization, which became the official organization, thus giving it more significance than ever before. Today, the WTO is the largest global trade organization and is in the best position to dispute, discuss, and resolve known or perceived unfair business and trade practices among countries. The creation of the WTO started a new process, and one that is in full swing today: regional economic integration. This regional economic integration, as the reading state, can occur in 4 ways: a free trade area, a customs union, common market, and economic union. The first trade area is the type of regional economic union that the U.S. primarily employs. One of its most famous is NAFTA. However, that agreement, at the assistance of the United States, was renegotiated in 2018 by the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The focus was to level the economic playing field between the 3 countries, and especially between the United States and Mexico. There are other well-known free trade agreements like Mercosur, CARICOM, Andean Community, and CAFTA-DR. Some countries like the U.S. can be a party to multiple free trade agreements. Free trade agreements and custom unions have the potential to lead countries to an economic union. The EU is the most integrated form of economic cooperation known. The creation of the EU has developed over time and took a significant step in creating a common currency. However, with this step came the need to establish monetary and fiscal targets for the members and development of a common foreign defense policy. However, the UK never agreed to accepting the euro as its own currency and instead kept the pound sterling. By June 2016, the country voted in a national referendum to leave the EU. The details regarding Great Britain's departure will dictate the type of economic relationship Great Britain will have with its former EU partners. As a global business leader and manager, you may find yourself with important decisions to be made. For example, today 25% of your product is sold into EU countries, but they just imposed a 25% tariffs on all imports like yours. There may be a need to conduct an analysis to determine if setting up a new production facility in the EU would improve the company's financial positions. This is the action many U.S. companies took when the tariff war broke out between the United States and China. Numerous U.S. companies sought new production facilities outside of China, like in Vietnam, to avoid the U.S. tariffs. Or you have a large manufacturing facility in Great Britain, and now exports will be treated differently when selling to the EU. It is true, many businesses have profited from regional cooperation or integration. However, many have failed because somebody else, somewhere else, is able to produce it cheaper with equal or better quality to sell into those new markets. In closing this brief review of Chapter 5, it is very important to understand and comprehend the nature of global and regional economic cooperation and integration. Companies are always seeking and analyzing new markets for growth. One of the first steps in the research process on a potential market is to understand if the country's market is governed by free trade agreements or economic union. This will help with the go or no-go decision into a new market.